By December 1914, the First World War was raging over Europe. Meanwhile, in the calm waters of Falkland Harbour, a transformation had been taking place under Governor Allardyce's watchful eye, fortifying its defences against potential threats. As Admiral Sturdee's squadron, fueled by coal and anchored in Port Stanley, readied itself for departure in a few days, the tranquil harbour masked the impending storm. A German squadron, led by Admiral von Spee, approached in the early morning, oblivious to the British fleet's strength. The guard ship Canopus fired warning shots, revealing the British presence and prompting the Germans to turn away momentarily. Sturdee, unprepared for a battle, did his best to get his squadron in a battle-prepared state. The Battle of the Falkland Islands was about to break out. Today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. Are you facing challenges that interfere with your happiness or goals? Let's talk about how BetterHelp can make a positive impact on your life. Whether you prefer phone calls, video chats, or messaging, BetterHelp connects you with licensed therapists trained to provide unbiased advice. No need to worry about finding the right therapist in your area. With over 30,000 professionals in their network, BetterHelp ensures a match tailored to your needs within 48 hours in most cases. Your mental health journey should be comfortable. Schedule sessions at your convenience and switch therapists hassle-free if needed. Give your mind the attention it deserves. Join over 4 million people who've chosen BetterHelp to live a healthier, happier life. Visit betterhelp.com/houseofhistory or click the link in the description to get started. Clicking the link not only supports this channel, but also gets you a special 10% off your first month. In early November 1914, the Royal Navy's Admiralty learned of a devastating defeat. The German East Asiatic Squadron, under Vice Admiral Graf Maximilian von Spee, had defeated Christopher Craddock's squadron at Coronel, sinking HMS Monmouth and the flagship Good Hope, inflicting over 1,600 casualties. The battle's surviving HMS Glasgow, Otranto, and Canopus fled towards the Falkland Islands. It was a great German victory. Von Spee's squadron did not just inflict material damage, but also delivered a psychological blow to the British Empire. It marked the Royal Navy's first naval defeat in over a century. Admiral of the fleet, Sir John Fisher, appointed as First Sea Lord just 3 days prior, immediately prepared the reprisal. He issued instructions to reinforce the South Atlantic, where Rear Admiral Archibald Stoddart commanded the remainder of the fleet. HMS Carnarvon, Stoddart's flagship, and Cornwall were directed to join HMS Defence and Edinburgh Castle off Montevideo, while the survivors of Coronel, the Canopus, Glasgow, and Otranto were ordered there as well. HMS Kent, en route from Sierra Leone, also received orders to join the fleet. Meanwhile, Admiral Fisher redirected the powerful battlecruisers Invincible and Inflexible to counter von Spee's fleet. They departed from Devonport on November 11th under the Admiralty's Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Admiral Sturdee's command. The battle cruisers sailed towards their destination. Inflexible was the flagship of the Mediterranean Fleet, commissioned on October 20th, 1908. Inflexible had a displacement of 17,290 long tons, emphasizing its substantial size and tonnage. With a complement of 784 crew members, the battlecruiser was armed with 4 twin 12-inch guns, 16 single 4-inch guns, and 5 18-inch torpedo tubes, showcasing a strong offensive capability. It attained a speed of 26.5 knots during trials, highlighting its impressive propulsion system and agility at sea. HMS Invincible, commissioned in 1909, boasted a powerful armament featuring 4 twin 12-inch guns as its primary firepower, complemented by 16 single 4-inch guns and 5 18-inch torpedo tubes. With a displacement of 17,250 long tons, it could reach a speed of 25.5 knots powered by 31 Yarrow boilers and propelled by 4 shafts, with 2 direct-drive steam turbine sets. The ship's crew numbered up to 1,000. Despite a hiatus for a refit in 1914, Invincible was recommissioned swiftly as war broke out. Commander Sturdee, a distinguished rear admiral known for his expertise in torpedo tactics and diplomatic crises, assumed the role of Commander-in-Chief of the South Atlantic and Pacific, with potential expansion to the North Atlantic and Caribbean if the battle shifted. Recognizing the urgency to replenish ammunition, Vice Admiral von Spee sought refuge in Valparaiso, but the absence of friendly ports limited restocking options. International law forced Dresden and Leipzig to return to Mas Afuera. Facing the dilemma of retreat versus refitting, von Spee, despite Chilean hospitality, learned of reinforcements heading to North America, and Berlin advised him to break through for home. Departing on November 15th with the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Dresden, Leipzig, Nürnberg, hospital ship Seydlitz, and colliers Baden and Santa Isabel, they sacrificed the slow Titania. Loaded with coal from prizes, the squadron sailed, abandoning Pacific cruiser warfare. The squadron found respite off Picton Island, seizing and sinking the British bark Drumya. On December 6th, von Spee revealed his plan to attack the Falkland Islands. Intelligence suggested a vulnerable British presence. He aimed to dismantle British facilities and apprehend the Falklands governor in retaliation for Samoa's German governor's imprisonment. On November 26th, the Glasgow, Canopus, and Otranto joined the battlecruisers off the Abrolhos Rocks, anticipating engagement with the German squadron. Along the way, Sturdee had picked up the auxiliary cruiser Macedonia and the cruiser Bristol. Urged by Captain Luce to speedily reach the Falklands, the whole force sailed after 48 hours. Von Spee, isolated from German intelligence due to a lack of wireless communication, remained unaware of Sturdee's force approaching. By 10 a.m. on December 7th, Sturdee's squadron arrived at the Falkland Islands. They immediately commenced coaling to sustain the depleted fleet. The Falklands Governor Allardyce had transformed the harbour into a defensive stronghold, with local defence forces and fortified positions established. Sturdee planned to coal his squadron and depart on December 9th towards Cape Horn. The Bristol and Glasgow anchored in the inner harbour at Port Stanley, while Macedonia patrolled the sea as the Canopus guarded the port. The remainder of the fleet anchored at Port William. On the morning of December 8th, the German squadron approached the Falklands. Von Spee decided to attack, unaware that the British fleet was readying for action. By 8 a.m., the Canopus communicated 2 unidentified warships were approaching. These were the Gneisenau and Nürnberg, sailing ahead of the main squadron. In response, Sturdee ordered the still refueling battlecruisers, Invincible and Inflexible, to be ready for battle. None of the other ships were fully ready. To deter the Germans, Canopus fired at the Gneisenau and Nürnberg. A salvo from the Canopus hit one of the ships. The realization the British had a strong presence in the harbour caused them to turn away from the islands, to rejoin the main German squadron. Luce's Glasgow was ordered to join Kent, laying guard. Within 30 minutes, all ships except the Bristol were leaving the harbour. The Invincible sailed ahead, followed by the Inflexible, Cornwall, and Carnarvon. The Kent and Glasgow also departed, as the Macedonia was ordered back to port. Sturdee gave the general chases command, allowing each captain to act on his own accord in bringing down the German squadron. The coal-powered warships, including battle cruisers Invincible and Inflexible, produced significant black smoke. By 11 a.m., the smoke obstructed Admiral Sturdee's view of the German squadron, leading to a speed reduction to 24 knots. Despite being slower for the battlecruisers, it challenged lighter British cruisers and exceeded the speed of the German ships. The German squadron united 15 miles southeast of the Falkland Harbour, continuing in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, Bristol reported 3 additional ships, von Spee's hospital ship and colliers. Sturdee directed Captain Fanshawe to take Macedonia and destroy the colliers. At 11:15 a.m., Glasgow signaled the Germans altering course to starboard, prompting Sturdee's course adjustment. At 12:20 p.m., as the Germans dispersed, Sturdee decided to attack. At 12:50 p.m., the British battlecruisers accelerated to 25 knots, closing in on the slow Leipzig and opening fire at 16,000 yards. The battle developed into separate actions, with British light cruisers pursuing German light cruisers, while the battlecruisers engaged the armoured cruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. The Inflexible engaged in a duel with Scharnhorst, while the Invincible fought the Gneisenau. The Germans rapidly closed the distance, sailing parallel to the British ships. Especially the Germans saved their ammunition, having expended over 40% at Coronel. Just before 3 p.m., both the British and Germans turned their ships to continue sailing parallel and closing the distance slightly. With the distance reduced to 12,500 yards, the Germans opened fire both with their main and secondary armament of 6-inch guns. The Germans' accurate shooting posed a threat, hitting the Invincible, but the British battlecruisers inflicted damage on the Gneisenau. They continued to score direct hits. During the duel, fires broke out aboard the Scharnhorst as the Gneisenau began to list. This reduced Gneisenau's firing capabilities. By 3:30 p.m., both German ships received extensive damage. There were fires, smoke, and their armament barely worked. The Germans steered their vessels in an attempt to get out of range. The Inflexible followed in pursuit, closing the gap. The Invincible did the same for the Gneisenau. At approximately 4 p.m., the German ship Scharnhorst abruptly stopped firing and tilted to starboard. Inflexible turned back to engage Gneisenau, while Invincible stayed with Scharnhorst until it capsized. Von Spee's final signal to Gneisenau was an attempt to save the ship, but at 4:17 p.m., Scharnhorst sank without a rescue operation due to ongoing action with Gneisenau, resulting in the loss of all crew. Sturdee redirected Invincible to attack Gneisenau, but smoke obstructed the view, prompting a turn. Inflexible, acting without orders, also turned, and Carnarvon joined the attack. Despite deteriorating weather, all 3 British ships fired on Gneisenau, causing significant damage. By 5:30 p.m., Gneisenau, in poor condition with reduced speed and on fire, turned towards Invincible, eventually stopping. The British battlecruisers closed in, and despite a momentary ceasefire order, resumed firing as Gneisenau fired sporadically. At 5:45 p.m., Gneisenau ceased firing, capsized and sank, with the British ships rescuing about 200 of its crew. The captain deliberately sank the ship using seacocks, ensuring a swift descent and taking many crew members down with the ship. Adverse weather conditions and frigid waters resulted in few German survivors. While this duel had been ongoing, the German light cruisers Dresden, Nuremberg, and Leipzig complied with Admiral von Spee's order to head south, maintaining a distance of approximately 12 miles ahead of their British pursuers, Glasgow, Kent, and Cornwall. The German cruisers' maximum speeds were Dresden at 27 knots, Glasgow at 25 knots, Nuremberg at 23.5 knots, and Kent, Cornwall, and Leipzig at 23 knots. However, the German cruisers suffered from poor maintenance, having been constantly at sea since June and undergoing a major battle, resulting in machinery strain and reduced efficiency. Outgunned by the British armoured cruisers Kent and Cornwall, which had 6-inch guns compared to the German cruisers' 4.1. The Germans were also low on ammunition, particularly those involved in the Coronel Battle and Pacific bombardments. As the chase began around 1:30 p.m., the German cruisers loosely kept together, with Glasgow overtaking Kent and Cornwall in pursuit, focusing on Leipzig. Around 3:30 p.m., the German light cruisers scattered, with Nuremberg turning away and Dresden disappearing. Kent engaged Nuremberg, while Cornwall, assisted by Glasgow, targeted Leipzig. At approximately 4:30 p.m., the British armoured cruisers opened fire just out of range, leading to manoeuvres by the German and British ships. Nuremberg turned east, pursued by Kent, and Leipzig turned southeast, engaging Glasgow. Kent, short on fuel and unable to coal at Port Stanley before the engagement, resorted to burning all available wood to achieve an impressive speed of 25 knots. By 5 p.m., Kent closed in on Nürnberg within 12,000 yards. Nürnberg fired her rear 4.1-inch guns, with shots falling around Kent but causing only one hit. Kent's forward 6-inch gun had insufficient range to retaliate effectively. By 5:30 p.m., Kent was closing the gap, and at 5:45 p.m., Nürnberg turned to port, bringing her broadside into action. Kent, avoiding a long-range duel due to vibration issues and fading light, turned to port onto a converging course. At 6 p.m., the range decreased to 3,000 yards, and Kent's larger guns began impacting Nürnberg. By 6:10 p.m., Nürnberg, losing speed on fire and with only 2 guns operational, Kent passed her, raking Nürnberg's starboard side with devastating consequences. Nürnberg became stationary and silent by 6:25 p.m., heavily listing and burning fiercely. Kent ceased firing, but upon seeing Nürnberg still flying her ensign, resumed firing until the ensign was hauled down. By around 7:30 p.m., Nürnberg turned over to starboard and sank. Search efforts for survivors continued until 9 p.m., resulting in 7 crew members being rescued. In the engagement, Kent was hit 40 times, suffering 4 men killed and 12 wounded. By approximately 4:45 p.m., Cornwall's gunfire was straddling Leipzig, and Glasgow circled to join her on Leipzig's port side, firing into the same section of the German ship. Within 15 minutes, Leipzig was significantly damaged, and her gunnery lieutenant was killed, impairing effective control of her firing. Around 5 p.m., Cornwall turned sharply to starboard, bringing her port broadside into action. Leipzig was moving so slowly that Cornwall and Glasgow could circle her, firing from various angles and ranges. Around 6 p.m., with increased rain, Captain Luce ordered the finishing blow. The British ships closed the range to 8,000 yards, and Cornwall fired lyddite, setting Leipzig ablaze. Despite continuous firing until 7 p.m., Leipzig, now a wreck with fires along her hull, continued to fly her ensign. Captain Luce waited for half an hour for surrender, but as the German ensign still flew, he ordered the resumption of firing. On Leipzig, the captain ordered seacocks opened, and 150 surviving crew assembled between fires, displaying 2 green lights as a sign of surrender. The British ships ceased fire and launched boats to pick up survivors. At 9:23 p.m., Leipzig capsized and sank, and despite prompt rescue efforts, only 5 officers and 13 seamen were saved, excluding the captain. In the engagement with Leipzig, Cornwall was hit 18 times but had no casualties, while Glasgow was hit twice, resulting in 1 fatality and 4 wounded. In pursuit, British light cruisers caught up with all German ships except the SMS Dresden, managing to escape. At the harbour, the collier's crew was removed from the ship before the vessels were sunk. Throughout the battle, the British Royal Navy experienced minimal casualties, with the HMS Invincible, Inflexible, Cornwall, Carnarvon, Bristol, Macedonia, and Canopus reporting no casualties. However, the HMS Kent recorded 4 killed and 12 wounded, and the HMS Glasgow had 1 killed and 4 wounded. On the German side, the SMS Scharnhorst was lost with no survivors among its crew of 52 officers and 788 non-commissioned ranks, including Admiral von Spee. The SMS Gneisenau had around 125 survivors out of its crew of 38 officers and 726 non-commissioned ranks, while the SMS Dresden, Nürnberg, and Leipzig reported varying degrees of casualties and survivors, with all survivors from the German ships becoming prisoners. Notably, Admiral Spee and 2 of his sons perished. This decisive British victory undid the repercussions of the earlier Battle of Coronel. Sturdee's success, marked by a baronetcy, avenged the British defeat. The Dresden, the last remnant of Spee's fleet, met its end in Cumberland Bay in March 1915. The Admiralty found relief in the destruction of Spee's squadron, freeing resources for other naval purposes. As the focus shifted to the North Sea and Mediterranean, German surface raiders diminished in significance compared to the threat posed by submarines. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.